March 10, 1945. The Philippine Sea, 600 miles south of Tokyo. Captain Robert van der Meer banks his P-51D Mustang through scattered clouds at 28,000 feet, his gloved hand steady on the throttle. Below him stretches an endless expanse of gray water, broken only by whitecaps that look like scattered rice grains from this altitude. His oxygen mask hisses with each breath, a rhythmic reminder that he's operating at the edge of human capability in a machine that shouldn't be here, doing what everyone said was impossible. The mission briefing 3 hours ago seemed almost casual in its audacity. Penetrate 660 miles into Japanese-held territory. Strike the Nakajima aircraft factory at Oda, northwest of Tokyo. Destroy Japan's ability to produce the key Ki-84 Frank fighter that had been causing unexpected trouble over the Philippines. Return to Iwo Jima before your fuel runs out. Simple. Except nothing about flying a single-engine fighter deeper into enemy territory than any American aircraft had ever ventured was simple. Van der Meer's Mustang, nicknamed Amsterdam Express, in honor of his Dutch immigrant parents, carries every modification the ground crews at Iwo could manage. Two 110-gallon drop tanks hang beneath the wings like silver teardrops. His 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns are loaded with a carefully calculated mix, armor-piercing incendiary rounds in the inboard guns, tracer rounds in the outboard positions. 2,280 rounds total. The armament chief had looked him in the eye and said, "Make every burst count, Captain. You won't get a second chance out there." The rendezvous point appears ahead, marked not by any landmark but by a specific set of coordinates that 73 other Mustangs are converging upon with mechanical precision. Through the morning haze, Van der Meer spots them materializing like ghosts. Silver cruciform shapes catching the dawn light, each one representing a pilot who volunteered for a mission that redefined the possible. No formation of single-engine fighters had ever struck this deep. The Japanese High Command had calculated the maximum range of American fighters with the same precision they calculated everything else. They had built their defensive strategy around those calculations. They were about to discover how catastrophically wrong mathematics could be when Americans decided to rewrite the rules. Squadron Leader Major Kenneth Walsh's voice crackles through Van der Meer's headset, distorted by distance and atmospheric interference. Phoenix Flight, this is Phoenix Lead. Loose deuce formation. Maintain fuel discipline. We cross the coast in 40 minutes. Expect company. The transmission is brief, professional, devoid of the bravado that Hollywood imagines. These men understand exactly what they're attempting. Van der Meer checks his instruments with practiced efficiency. Manifold pressure, 46 inches. RPM, 2,700. Fuel flow, 65 gallons per hour. The Packard-built Merlin V1650-7 engine hums with a sound that pilots describe almost reverently, a mechanical symphony of 1,695 horsepower compressed into 12 cylinders and delivered through a four-bladed propeller spinning at invisible velocity. This engine, this magnificent collaboration between British design and American manufacturing, is the heart of everything. Without the Merlin's two-stage supercharger, without its ability to breathe thin air at altitude and convert it into sea-level power, they would be turning back right now. The Japanese know this. American intelligence knows they know this. Which makes what's about to happen even more psychologically devastating. The formation climbs gradually to 32,000 feet, an altitude where the sky darkens to deep purple and the curve of the earth becomes visible. Up here, the Merlin's supercharger works overtime, compressing atmosphere so thin it barely qualifies as air, forcing it through intercoolers and into cylinders where it explodes with controlled fury. Japanese fighters with their single-stage superchargers struggle at this altitude, their engines gasping, their performance degraded by 40% or more. The Americans have turned altitude into a weapon, transformed the vertical dimension into a fortress where physics itself fights for them. 43 minutes later, the Japanese coastline emerges from the haze like a watercolor painting slowly gaining definition. Van der Meer feels his heart rate increase despite his training, despite his 17 previous combat missions, despite everything. This is different. They are crossing into the sacred homeland, the place Japanese propaganda promised would be defended by divine winds and unbreakable spirit. Every Japanese fighter pilot within 200 miles will be scrambling right now, clawing for altitude, desperate to intercept the impossible formation appearing on their radar screens. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. The call comes from Lieutenant Morrison, a 22-year-old from Montana with eyes like a hawk. Count 12, no, 18, make that 20-plus contacts. Van der Meer spots them instantly. Black specks against clouds, growing rapidly as they dive from 35,000 feet. Japanese fighters employing their altitude advantage, using gravity as an ally, committing to an attack they must know is desperate. The lead Japanese fighters are Ki-84 Hayats, the dreaded Frank that American intelligence has been warning about for 6 months. On paper, they're formidable, 2,000 horsepower Nakajima Hamar engines, heavy cannon armament, excellent maneuverability. In practice, Van der Meer has studied the intelligence reports. Engines suffering from poor quality control. Cannon ammunition limited to seconds of firing time. Pilots with perhaps 100 hours of training facing Americans with 600 hours. Mathematics again. The kind that determines who lives and who dies. The Japanese formation leader, flying with the precision that speaks of an experienced survivor, sets up for a classic head-on attack. It's a tactic that requires nerves of steel and perfect timing. Two fighters approaching each other at a combined speed exceeding 800 miles per hour, closure rate so fast that human reaction time barely factors. The Japanese pilot probably has 30mm cannon that could tear a Mustang in half with a single hit. But he also has maybe 50 rounds per gun and no second chances. Van der Meer extends slightly from formation, giving himself room to maneuver. The Frank grows in his windscreen, transformed from speck to aircraft to deadly machine in 3 heartbeats. He watches for the telltale flicker of cannon fire, the small explosions that would indicate his opponent has committed. At 800 yards, he sees them. Tiny flashes of orange. The Japanese pilot has opened fire too early, perhaps nervous, perhaps inexperienced, perhaps simply desperate. The 30mm shells arc through space where Van der Meer's Mustang will be in 2 seconds if he doesn't move. Van der Meer brakes hard left, pulling 6 Gs that crush him into his seat and narrow his vision to a tunnel. His G-suit inflates automatically, squeezing his legs and abdomen, forcing blood back to his brain. Japanese pilots have no such equipment. At 6 Gs, they're fighting unconsciousness. At 7 Gs, they're blind. This technological edge, this simple difference in equipment, transforms combat geometry. Van der Meer can maneuver where they cannot follow. Physics has chosen sides. The Frank flashes past, close enough that Van der Meer glimpses details. The Hinomara national insignia. The exhaust staining on the cowling. The desperate face of a pilot who just missed his only clean shot. Van der Meer rolls inverted, pulls through, and finds himself 500 feet behind and slightly above the Japanese fighter as it tries to extend away. The Frank is fast, perhaps faster than intelligence estimated, but not fast enough. Van der Meer frames the enemy aircraft in his illuminated gunsight, a circle and dot that transforms aerial combat into trigonometry. He leads the target, accounting for deflection, for relative motion, for the ballistic drop of bullets traveling at 2,900 feet per second. His thumb rests on the trigger mounted on his control stick. 6 machine guns synchronized to converge at 300 yards. 4,800 rounds per minute of kinetic energy about to be released. The trigger breaks clean. The Mustang shudders as all 6 guns fire in harmony, a sound like tearing canvas amplified 1,000 times. Tracer rounds arc through space in lazy-looking curves that belie their actual velocity. Van der Meer walks his fire into the target, observing impacts dancing across the Frank's fuselage. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds penetrating aluminum skin, destroying structure, igniting fuel, shattering the fragile machinery that keeps aircraft aloft. The Frank begins trailing white smoke that transitions to black within seconds. The canopy detaches, tumbling away, and a figure ejects into space. The parachute deploys, white silk blossoming against blue sky. Van der Meer watches it for 3 seconds, marking the location in his mind with professional detachment that will transform into something more complicated during sleepless nights years from now. Then he's scanning for threats, checking his six, rejoining formation, compartmentalizing because combat allows no time for reflection. Scratch 1 franc. Morrison's voice carries triumph mixed with disbelief. Dutch, that was textbook. But Van der Meer is already processing the next threat. More Japanese fighters climbing from below, perhaps 30 aircraft now, throwing themselves at the American formation with courage that borders on suicide. They know what this penetration means. They understand the strategic implications. If American fighters can operate over the homeland with impunity, the war is lost regardless of how many battles they win. Major Walsh's voice cuts through the radio chatter with command authority. Phoenix Flight, extend to the deck. Targets of opportunity, then rejoin for egress. Make it count. The formation breaks, Mustangs peeling off in pairs toward the landscape below where Nakajima's factory complex spreads across 40 acres of what was farmland 2 years ago. Van der Meer rolls into a 60-degree dive, his wingman Lieutenant Bobby chin tight on his right wing. Chen, a Chinese-American from San Francisco's Chinatown, has personal reasons for being here that go beyond military duty. His extended family suffered under Japanese occupation. He flies with a focus that borders on vengeance, tempered by professionalism. The factory complex resolves into individual buildings as they plummet through 20,000 feet. Van der Meer spots the main assembly hall, a massive structure with sawtooth roofing designed to maximize natural light. Inside, workers are assembling the key 84 fighters that will challenge American air superiority. Or they were. In approximately 30 seconds, they'll be running for their lives. Anti-aircraft fire erupts around them, black puffs of explosive fury that the Japanese call flowers of death. The flak is surprisingly heavy, surprisingly accurate. Intelligence underestimated the defensive armament. A shell detonates close enough that Van der Meer hears the shrapnel impact his wing, a sound like hail on a tin roof. He checks his instruments. No fuel leak. No control problems. Lucky. At 8,000 feet, Van der Meer levels off and lines up on the assembly hall. His finger finds the trigger again. 6 machine guns pour fire into the building's roof, the incendiary rounds designed for exactly this purpose. Armor-piercing components penetrate the sheet metal, incendiary compounds ignite whatever they touch. Within seconds, the roof is stitching with fires. He holds the trigger for a 3-second burst, expending 240 rounds, then pulls up hard to avoid the inevitable explosion. Chen makes his pass 2 seconds behind, adding his firepower to the conflagration. The assembly hall's roof collapses inward, secondary explosions blossoming as fuel and ammunition stored inside ignite. Black smoke boils skyward, visible for 50 miles. Van der Meer feels grim satisfaction. Every key 84 in that building is destroyed. Every tool, every jig, every partially assembled component. Japan's production capacity just took a hit measured in months of delayed output. Phoenix lead, this is Phoenix 3. I'm hit. Engines running rough. The call transforms the mission from offensive to survival. Lieutenant Parker, a Wisconsin farm boy who shouldn't be old enough to shave let alone fly combat missions, is trailing white coolant vapor from his engine cowling. The Merlin's liquid cooling system is its Achilles heel. A single bullet through a coolant line means progressive engine failure and forced landing. Major Walsh's response is immediate. Phoenix 3, what's your status? Parker's voice is steady despite circumstances that would panic lesser men. Manifold pressure dropping. Temperature rising. I can maintain power for maybe 10 minutes. Walsh makes the command decision that defines leadership. Phoenix Flight, rally on 3. We're escorting him out. The formation reforms around Parker's damaged Mustang, 73 healthy fighters surrounding one wounded bird, reducing their speed to match his capabilities, extending their time over hostile territory, accepting risk to save one man. This is the difference, van der Meer thinks. The Japanese might accept their pilots' deaths with fatalistic honor. Americans brought everyone home or died trying. Japanese fighters make repeated attacks during the egress, but their efforts are increasingly desperate and disorganized. Van der Meer shoots down 2 more, though he takes no satisfaction from victories that feel more like execution than combat. These Japanese pilots, brave as they are, lack the training, the fuel, the ammunition, the support systems that American pilots take for granted. They're fighting a war already lost, dying for a cause already defeated, sustained only by loyalty that transcends rational calculation. 60 miles from the coast, Parker's engine seizes completely. The propeller windmills to a stop, transformed from power source to air brake. His Mustang, sleek and deadly with power, becomes an awkward glider with a sink rate of 1,000 feet per minute. Parker's voice remains calm. Phoenix lead, I'm going in. C looks relatively calm. I'll take my chances with the Pacific. Van der Meer watches as Parker performs a textbook ditching procedure. The Mustang touches down on the wave tops, skips once, then noses in with a splash that seems anticlimactically gentle from altitude. The aircraft floats for perhaps 30 seconds before beginning its final dive to the ocean floor. Parker emerges from the cockpit, scrambles onto the wing, and deploys his life raft before the Mustang disappears beneath him. Dumbo flight, this is Phoenix lead. We have a man in the water. Walsh transmits coordinates with precision. Somewhere behind them, a PBY Catalina flying boat is already altering course, its crew preparing for a rescue mission that will risk their lives to save one fighter pilot they've never met. Again, the difference. Americans built systems, infrastructure, entire philosophies around the principle that every life mattered. The formation circles Parker's position until a PBY arrives 2 hours later, its ungainly shape somehow beautiful in context. They watch the rescue unfold, see Parker hauled aboard, see him wave toward the circling fighters before disappearing into the Catalina's fuselage. Only then does Walsh give the order to head home. Iwo Jima appears on the horizon 6 hours and 40 minutes after they launched. Mount Suribachi rises from the island like a volcanic promise of safety. Van der Meer's fuel gauge shows 45 gallons remaining, maybe 20 minutes of flight time if he's gentle with the throttle. He's exhausted in ways that transcend physical fatigue, drained by hours of intense focus, constant vigilance, combat stress, and operational pressure that never relents. The landing is routine, which feels absurd after everything that preceded it. Tires kiss coral runway. Tailwheel settles. Van der Meer taxis to his revetment where ground crew already wait, tools ready, fuel truck approaching, ammunition cart standing by. They'll have this Mustang refueled, rearmed, and ready for another mission within 3 hours if needed. After debriefing, after the intelligence officers have extracted every detail, after the mission is officially recorded as successful target destruction, 1 aircraft damaged, pilot recovered, Van der Meer walks to the edge of the airfield. The sun is setting, painting the sky in colors that seem inappropriate given the day's violence. He's credited with 3 confirmed kills, bringing his total to 11. 4 more makes him an ace. The mathematics feel hollow. Lieutenant Chen joins him, offering a canteen of water that tastes like metal and chemicals. They stand in silence, watching P-51s land from follow-on missions. More silver crosses against orange sky. More pilots who flew impossible distances, fought impossible odds, returned to an island that was enemy territory 3 weeks ago. We proved something today, Chen finally says. They can't hide anymore. Nowhere is safe. Van der Meer nods slowly. It's true. The strategic implications of very long-range fighter operations have just rewritten the war's mathematics. Japan's homeland, protected for centuries by distance and ocean, is now vulnerable to daily attack. Their industrial capacity, already strained, will be systematically destroyed. Their air defenses, already inadequate, will be ground down through attrition they cannot replace. Over the next 4 months, van der Meer will fly 37 more missions over Japan. He'll shoot down 8 additional aircraft, bringing his final total to 19. He'll see friends die, some in combat, more from operational accidents and weather. He'll watch the systematic destruction of Japan's ability to wage war, one factory, one airfield, one training facility at a time. On August 9, 1945, he'll be flying patrol when a B-29 named Boxcar delivers its payload to Nagasaki. He won't know what happened until debriefing, when intelligence officers explain in hushed tones about atomic weapons and instantaneous destruction. The war ends 6 days later. In his final combat mission report, van der Meer writes, "The P-51D Mustang accomplished what strategic planners said was impossible. It brought American air power to the Japanese homeland with devastating effect. More than any single weapon, more than any single battle, the very long-range fighter operations demonstrated that distance was no longer defense, that technology could overcome geography, and that industrial capacity would ultimately determine modern war's outcome. We flew machines built by welders in California, powered by engines designed in Britain, fueled by oil from Texas, and guided by navigation systems developed by scientists whose names we'd never know. Every mission was a triumph of integrated systems over individual heroics. Japan fought with courage and determination. But courage cannot overcome mathematics. Determination cannot defeat logistics. And no amount of warrior spirit can bridge the gap when your opponent produces 15 aircraft for every one of yours, trains pilots 3 times as long, and builds rescue systems to ensure those pilots fight again tomorrow." 67 years later, at a museum dedication ceremony in Pearl Harbor, a frail man in his 90s will stand before a restored P-51D painted in the colors of Amsterdam Express. Robert van der Meer, retired colonel, will place his hand on the cowling and say to assembled veterans and journalists, "This aircraft represented America at its finest. Not because it was a weapon, but because it was a promise. A promise that free people, working together, drawing on diverse talents, could overcome any tyranny. The Mustang didn't just win battles. It demonstrated that democracy, properly mobilized, possesses advantages that authoritarian systems cannot match. Innovation over tradition. Adaptability over rigidity. Value for human life over expendability. Those lessons remain relevant." The P-51D in that museum, serial number 44 to 73415, recorded 127 combat missions over Japan between March and August 1945. It returned from every one. The survival rate speaks to engineering excellence, pilot skill, and systematic support that left nothing to chance. Of the 174 Mustangs that flew the first mission to Tokyo, 147 survived the war. The 27 losses were distributed, 11 to combat, 16 to operational causes. Even in loss, the statistics reveal American advantages. Rescue systems recovered 19 of those 27 pilots. They flew again. Japan's Ki-84He-8, theoretically comparable, tells a different story. Of 3,514 produced, combat records account for 1,887 losses. The other 1,600 plus simply disappeared into the chaos of war's end, destroyed by bombing, abandoned due to lack of fuel or parts, or bulldozed into pits by occupation forces. One survives in a museum, a solitary testament to what might have been had Japan possessed the industrial infrastructure, resource access, and technological capacity to produce the aircraft its engineers designed. The contrast defines the Pacific War's outcome more clearly than any battle. Superior technology, multiplied by superior production, supported by superior logistics, wielded by superior training, equals victory. Not inevitable victory. Not preordained victory. But victory made probable by every advantage accumulated through years of investment in education, infrastructure, innovation, and industrial capacity. The shock Japanese pilots experienced seeing P-51 Mustangs over Tokyo was more than tactical surprise. It was the collapse of every assumption their strategy relied upon. Distance would not protect them. Divine winds would not save them. Courage alone could not prevail. The mathematics of modern warfare had spoken with finality. In the end, the very long-range fighter mission proved something beyond military capability. It demonstrated that in the industrial age, war's outcome is determined long before the first shot. It's determined in factories and universities, in research laboratories and training facilities, in oil fields and steel mills. The battles simply confirm what the industrial base has already decided. Japan fought brilliantly with insufficient means. America fought efficiently with overwhelming resources. The result was never in doubt once the full weight of American industry was brought to bear. The P-51D Mustang over Mount Fuji remains history's perfect image of that reality. An American fighter, built by California workers, powered by a British engine manufactured in Detroit, flown by a pilot trained in Texas, maintained by mechanics from every state in the Union, supported by logistics stretching across an ocean, operating 750 miles from base to deliver a message that required no translation. Your isolation is ended. Your homeland is vulnerable. Your defeat is inevitable. The divine wind had been conquered by engineering. The warrior spirit had been overcome by industrial mathematics. And the empire of the rising sun found itself overshadowed by wings of aluminum and engines of American resolve.